Aboard the SS Meridian, a grand ocean liner slicing through the stormy Atlantic, a chilling mystery unfolds. The ship's navigator is found dead, poisoned, his prized crimson compass shattered, a symbol of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, steps into a web of secrets. A stern captain hiding a grudge, a restless crew member plotting mutiny, and a poised passenger with a shadowed past. As the storm rages, Poirot unravels lies, ambition, and vengeance to reveal a killer whose plan threatens the ship itself. Will he restore order before the Meridian loses its way? Dive into the Crimson Compass, where every clue points to danger. Chapter 1. The SS Meridian. The SS Meridian, a proud steamer of the White Star Line, carved its path through the restless Atlantic, its hull a defiant silhouette against the iron-gray waves. It was October, and the air carried a sharp bite, the kind that made one's breath visible and thoughts turn inward. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a mustache as precise as a draftsman's line, stood at the ship's railing, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. His gray eyes, keen as a falcon's, scanned the horizon, where sea and sky blurred into a somber unity. He had boarded the Meridian in Southampton, bound for New York, seeking a rare interlude of tranquility. Yet, as always, his mind, those celebrated little gray cells, refused to idle. The rhythm of the ship's engines, steady as a heartbeat, seemed to pulse with an undercurrent of unease, though he could not yet name its source. The morning had begun with a disturbance, one that rippled through the ship like a stone dropped in still water. At precisely 7 o'clock, a steward had discovered Mr. Edward Hargrove, the ship's navigator, dead in the navigation room. He was slumped over his desk, his head resting on a sprawl of charts, as if sleep had claimed him mid-task. Beside him lay his compass, a fine instrument with a crimson needle, its glass face shattered into a mosaic of jagged shards. The ship's doctor, a wiry man named Doctor Finch, with a penchant for fidgeting, had examined the body and pronounced death by poisoning. Aconite, he suspected, though the precise method remained elusive. The news had spread swiftly, whispers darting through the dining saloon and along the narrow corridors, transforming the Meridian into a floating hive of suspicion. Captain Reginald Thorne, a man of imposing stature with a face etched by years at sea, had acted decisively, sealing the navigation room and summoning Poirot. The detective now stood within its confines, the air thick with the scent of salt, ink, and something faintly metallic. The room was a study in order, save for the grim tableau of Hargrove's absence. The charts, meticulously inked, mapped the ship's course with mathematical precision. The broken compass, however, drew Poirot's gaze like a magnet. Its crimson needle, a rare flourish in an otherwise utilitarian tool, was snapped cleanly at its base, no longer pointing north but to oblivion. Poirot's lips pursed beneath his mustache. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice soft but resonant in the confined space. A compass is the soul of a ship, guiding it through the chaos of the sea. To destroy it is not merely vandalism. It is a gesture, a declaration. This, Captain, is murder with purpose. Thorne, standing by the door with arms crossed, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes, a faded blue, betrayed a flicker of disquiet. "Hargrove was a good man," he said, his voice gravelly but controlled. 20 years at sea, never a misstep until recently. No enemies I know of. This makes no sense, Monsieur Poirot." The captain's hands, roughened by years of handling ropes and wheels, twitched slightly, as if longing for something to grip. Poirot noted this, filing it away as he did all details, however small. The detective knelt beside the desk, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. The charts showed the Meridian's intended path, a clean arc across the Atlantic, yet one corner bore a faint smudge, as if a sleeve had brushed it in haste. Poirot's fingers, gloved in fine leather, hovered over the broken compass. The glass was not merely cracked but pulverized, suggesting force beyond a casual blow. "This was no accident," he said, his tone measured. "The compass was broken with intent, perhaps to conceal, perhaps to proclaim. But what, précisément, does it proclaim?" Dr. Finch, hovering nervously in the doorway, cleared his throat. "The poison, Monsieur Poirot. It acts quickly. Hargrove would have been dead within minutes. No signs of a struggle, though." He gestured toward a small vial on the desk, its label faded but hinting at a chemical tang. Poirot lifted it carefully, sniffing delicately. "Aconite, you say? A subtle choice. No taste, no odor to betray it. But how was it given? No cup? No glass?" His voice trailed off, his mind already tracing invisible threads. The captain coughed, breaking the silence. "I've questioned the crew and passengers who had access to this room. 3 stand out. Myself, as I oversee all operations, Mr. Samuel Blake, Hargrove's assistant, and a passenger, Miss Clara Langston, who visited Hargrove last evening." Thorne's jaw tightened. "I trust my crew, but I'll not hinder your investigation. Find the truth, Poirot." Poirot rose, brushing invisible dust from his impeccable coat. "The truth, Captain, is like a star in the daylight, present but not always visible. I shall find it." He stepped toward the door, pausing to glance back at the shattered compass. Its crimson needle seemed to accuse, to demand answers. Poirot's lips curved slightly, not in a smile, but in acknowledgement of the challenge. The SS Meridian sailed on, but its course was no longer certain, not until Hercule Poirot unraveled the mystery of the Crimson Compass. Chapter 2. The Suspects. The SS Meridian pressed onward through the Atlantic's restless waves, its engines a steady thrum beneath the polished decks. Hercule Poirot, having left the navigation room with its grim relics, retired to the ship's lounge, a sanctuary of mahogany paneling and plush armchairs, where passengers sipped tea and murmured in hushed tones. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of brine that clung to everything aboard. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, sat at a corner table, his small hands folded neatly, his gray eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. The death of Edward Hargrove had cast a pall over the ship, and the whispers of murder, like ripples on water, grew ever wider. Poirot knew that to unravel the mystery of the Crimson Compass, he must first understand the hearts and minds of those who might have wielded the poison. Captain Reginald Thorne had insisted on accompanying Poirot to the lounge, his broad frame filling the doorway as he entered. The captain's presence was commanding, his uniform crisp, but his weathered face bore the strain of a man unaccustomed to such disruptions on his vessel. "I've assembled the 3 you'll want to speak with," Thorne said, his voice low but resonant, like the toll of a ship's bell. "Myself, of course, as I had access to Hargrove's quarters, Samuel Blake, his assistant, and Miss Clara Langston, the passenger who saw him last. They're waiting in the private dining room." His blue eyes, faded by years of squinting into the sun, met Poirot's with a mixture of deference and impatience. "I trust you'll be discreet, Monsieur Poirot. The passengers are uneasy enough." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Discretion, Captain, is the companion of truth. I shall be as precise as the needle of a compass. Before it was broken, naturellement." Thorn's lips tightened, but he nodded and led the way to the dining room, a smaller chamber adorned with nautical charts framed in brass and a long oak table polished to a mirror's sheen. The three suspects awaited, each an island of secrets in the sea of Poirot's scrutiny. The captain's testimony. Captain Thorn seated himself first, his posture rigid, as if he were still at the helm. He was a man in his late 40s, with a jaw carved from granite and hands that bore the calluses of a life spent wrestling the sea. His hair, once dark, was streaked with silver, and his eyes held a guarded intensity. Poirot, settling opposite him, opened his notebook, his fountain pen poised like a surgeon's scalpel. "Monsieur le Capitaine," he began, his voice soft but piercing. "You knew Monsieur Hargrove well, oui? Tell me of him, and of your movements last evening." Thorn cleared his throat, his fingers drumming briefly on the table before stilling. "Hargrove was my navigator for 5 years," he said. "A meticulous man, never late, never careless, until recently, that is. He made an error last month, misplotted our course off the Azores, nearly ran us into a storm. I corrected him, and he fixed it, but it shook my confidence." His tone was measured, but Poirot noted a slight tightening of his jaw, a flicker of something unspoken. "As for last night, I was in my quarters after dinner, reviewing the ship's logs, alone. I retired at 10 and saw no one until the steward's report this morning." Poirot's pen scratched lightly on the page. "This error of Hargrove's, it was unusual, you say? Did it provoke discord between you?" Thorn's eyes narrowed, but he shook his head. "It was a professional matter, nothing more. I disciplined him, as is my duty. He took it well. No bad blood." Yet Poirot observed the captain's left hand, which clenched briefly into a fist before relaxing. "And the navigation room?" Poirot pressed. "You visited it often, non?" "Of course," Thorn replied, a touch of defensiveness in his voice. "It's my ship. I check on all operations. I was there yesterday afternoon, ensuring our course was sound. Hargrove was alive, working as usual." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the compass, Captain. Did you notice it then?" Thorn hesitated, his brow furrowing. "It was on his desk, intact. I didn't pay it much mind." Poirot made a note, his mind already sifting through the captain's words for inconsistencies. Thorn was a man of authority, accustomed to control, but even the steadiest hands could falter under pressure. The crew member's tale. Samuel Blake entered next, ushered in by a steward who lingered nervously at the door. Blake was a wiry man in his early 30s, with sharp features and eyes that darted like a fox's. His navy jumper was stained faintly with oil, and his hands, rough and calloused, betrayed his years of manual labor. He sat with a slouch, one leg bouncing restlessly, and fixed Poirot with a look that was half defiant, half wary. "I've nothing to hide," he said before Poirot could speak, his voice carrying the clipped cadence of a London dock worker. "Ask what you want." Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving Blake's. "Monsieur Blake, you were Monsieur Hargrove's assistant, oui? A man of ambition, perhaps, eager to rise in the ranks?" Blake's lips twitched into a smirk. "Who isn't? I've been at sea 10 years, learned navigation from Hargrove himself, He was a good teacher, even if he was set in his ways. His tone was casual, but Poirot noted the edge beneath it, like a blade hidden in cloth. "Tell me of last night," Poirot said, his pen poised. Blake shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "I was on deck, repairing rigging near the foremast. Storm's coming, and the lines needed checking. I was there till midnight, then turned in. Plenty of the crew saw me." His eyes flicked to the side, and Poirot caught the gesture. A tell, perhaps, of a man measuring his words. "You did not visit the navigation room?" Poirot asked. Blake shook his head. "No need. Hargrove handled the charts. I was just the grunt, fetching his tea, checking his figures." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Tea, you say? You brought him tea last evening?" Blake nodded, unperturbed. "Aye, around 8. He liked it strong, no sugar. Left it on his desk and went back to work." Poirot made a note, his mind latching onto the detail. Tea could carry poison as easily as warmth. "And the compass, Monsieur Blake? Did you see it?" Blake's smirk faded. "Sure, it was there. His pride and joy, that thing. Crimson needle, custom made. Bit gaudy, if you ask me." His tone was dismissive, but Poirot noted the faintest tremor in his hands, as if the mention of the compass stirred something. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "You admired Hargrove, yet you were content to remain his assistant. No dreams of taking his place?" Blake's eyes flashed. "I'm no fool, Poirot. I know my worth. Hargrove was old, slowing down. I'd have his job one day, fair and square. Didn't need to rush it." The defiance in his voice was brittle, and Poirot sensed a hunger beneath it, a man who chafed at being second. As Blake left, Poirot caught the faint scent of tobacco clinging to his clothes, a detail he tucked away like a coin in a pocket. The passenger's poise. Miss Clara Langston was the last to enter, and her presence shifted the room's atmosphere like a change in the wind. She was a woman in her early 30s, tall and slender, with auburn hair pinned elegantly beneath a velvet hat. Her dress, a deep green that caught the light like sea glass, spoke of taste and means, yet her demeanor was reserved, almost guarded. She sat with the grace of a dancer, her gloved hands resting lightly in her lap, and met Poirot's gaze with calm, hazel eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but clear, "I understand you wish to speak with me about poor Mr. Hargrove. I will help however I can." Poirot inclined his head, his expression courteous but probing. "Mademoiselle Langston, you are a passenger, yet you visited the navigation room last evening. This is unusual, non?" She nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Perhaps, but I have an interest in navigation. My father was a naval officer, and I grew up studying charts and stars. I asked Mr. Hargrove about our route, as I was curious about the constellations we might see. He was kind enough to indulge me." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted a slight tremor in her fingers, quickly stilled. "You saw him last, mademoiselle, before his death," Poirot said, his tone gentle but relentless. "What was his state of mind?" Clara's eyes flickered, as if searching for a memory. "He seemed preoccupied," she said. "Not rude, but distracted. He was working on his charts, muttering about coordinates. I stayed only a few minutes, then left him to his work. He was alive when I departed, Monsieur Poirot." Her words were precise, but Poirot sensed a careful selection, as if she were navigating her own course through the conversation. "And the compass?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Did you notice it?" Clara tilted her head, considering. "Yes, it was on his desk, a striking piece with a red needle. I remarked on it, and he said it was a gift from an old friend. It was intact when I left. Her voice held no hesitation, but Poirot observed the way her hands tightened briefly in her lap, a gesture so subtle it might have gone unnoticed by a less discerning eye. Poirot leaned back, his pen tapping lightly against his notebook. "You travel alone, mademoiselle, which is uncommon for a lady of your standing. May I ask the purpose of your journey?" Clara's smile was polite but guarded. "I am visiting family in New York," she said. "A personal matter, nothing more." Her answer was smooth, but Poirot sensed a wall behind it, a secret she did not wish to share. He made a note, his mind already tracing the threads of her story. The web of motives. As Clara left, Poirot remained at the table, his notebook open before him. The three suspects were as distinct as points on a chart, yet each held a piece of the puzzle. Captain Thorne, a man of duty, had admitted to a rift with Hargrove over a navigational error, a small crack in their professional bond, but enough to breed resentment. Samuel Blake, ambitious and restless, stood to gain from Hargrove's death, his path to the navigator's role now clear. And Clara Langston, with her poised demeanor and vague past, carried an air of mystery that intrigued Poirot most of all. Why had she sought out Hargrove, and what lay behind her interest in the stars? Poirot closed his notebook, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The broken compass loomed large in his thoughts, its crimson needle a silent accusation. "A murder," he murmured to himself, "is like a voyage. One must follow the currents of human nature to find the destination." He rose, his small frame filled with purpose, and stepped out into the corridor. The SS Meridian sailed on, its passengers oblivious to the storm brewing within its walls. Poirot, however, was not oblivious. He would follow the currents, and he would find the truth. Chapter 3. The Scene of the Crime. The SS Meridian pressed forward through the Atlantic's gray expanse, its bow cutting through waves that churned with the promise of an approaching storm. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the ship's gentle sway, made his way to the navigation room, where the tragedy of Edward Hargrove's death had unfolded. The corridor leading to it was narrow, its brass fittings gleaming under the electric lights, but the air felt close, heavy with the weight of recent events. Poirot's polished shoes tapped softly on the polished floor, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The broken compass, the poison, the smudged chart. These were the pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was determined to assemble them with the precision of a master craftsman. The navigation room, sealed since the discovery of Hargrove's body, was opened at Poirot's request by a young steward, whose hands trembled as he turned the key. Captain Thorne had stationed a guard outside, a burly crewman who nodded curtly as Poirot entered. The room was a study in order, its walls lined with shelves of nautical almanacs and rolled charts, its air tinged with the faint scent of ink and polished wood. A single porthole admitted a shaft of pale light, illuminating the desk where Hargrove had met his end. The body had been removed to the ship's infirmary, but the scene remained untouched, preserved like a tableau for Poirot's scrutiny. He stood at the threshold, his gray eyes sweeping the room with the intensity of a hawk. The desk, broad and solid, was the heart of the space, its surface cluttered with the tools of Hargrove's trade. A sextant, a pair of dividers, a logbook open to the previous day's entries. The charts, spread out like a canvas, detailed the Meridian's course with meticulous lines and annotations, each stroke a testament to Hargrove's skill. Yet Poirot's attention was drawn to a faint irregularity, a smudge on the chart's lower right corner, where the ink had blurred as if brushed by a careless hand. "Curieux," he murmured, leaning closer. The smudge was not random. It suggested haste, perhaps a struggle, though Dr. Finch had reported no signs of violence. The broken compass lay at the desk's edge, its presence as jarring as a discordant note in a symphony. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the shattered glass. The crimson needle, Hargrove's prized possession, was snapped at its base, its point no longer seeking north but frozen in futility. The damage was deliberate, the glass not merely cracked but pulverized, as if struck with force. Poirot's lips pursed beneath his mustache. "To break a compass," he said softly, "is to sever a ship's lifeline. This act, it speaks of anger, or of intent to conceal." He examined the shards, noting their distribution. Some had scattered across the desk, others to the floor, suggesting the blow had been delivered where the compass stood. Rising, Poirot turned his attention to the small vial Dr. Finch had mentioned, still resting near the logbook. Its label was faded, but a faint chemical odor lingered, sharp and acrid. Aconite, Finch had said, a poison swift and silent, requiring only a small dose to stop a heart. Poirot lifted the vial with a handkerchief, turning it in the light. "No cup, no glass," he mused. "How, then, was the poison given? In tea, perhaps, as Monsieur Blake mentioned?" The absence of a vessel intrigued him. If Hargrove had drunk poisoned tea, where was the evidence? The steward would need questioning, but first the room itself must yield its secrets. Poirot moved to the shelves, his fingers tracing the spines of almanacs and manuals. One book, a worn volume on celestial navigation, was slightly askew, its edge protruding as if hastily replaced. He pulled it down, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. Unfolding it, he found a sketch, a rough map of the ship's deck, with a single mark near the foremast, labeled Midnight. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but its presence was no accident. A rendezvous, perhaps, Poirot wondered, slipping the paper into his pocket. The foremast was where Samuel Blake claimed to have been working last night, repairing rigging. Coincidence, or something more? The detective circled the room, his mind weaving connections. The navigation room was not a place of casual visits. Only those with purpose came here. Captain Thorne, as overseer, had access, as did Blake, Hargrove's assistant. Miss Langston's visit was an anomaly, her interest in the stars plausible, but curious. Poirot paused by the porthole, gazing out at the restless sea. "The motive," he said to himself, "is hidden in the details. The smudge, the compass, the poison, the map, each is a thread in the tapestry of this crime." He returned to the desk, examining the logbook. Hargrove's final entry, dated the previous evening, noted the ship's position with his usual precision, but a marginal note caught Poirot's eye. "Course adjustment requested, refused." The handwriting was Hargrove's, but the words hinted at conflict. Who had requested the adjustment, and why had Hargrove refused? Poirot's thoughts turned to Miss Langston's visit, her mention of discussing the ship's route. Could her inquiry have been more than idle curiosity? The door creaked, and Dr. Finch appeared, his thin frame silhouetted against the corridor's light. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything?" he asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. Poirot turned, his expression unreadable. "I have found questions, Docteur, which is the beginning of answers. Tell me, the aconite. Could it have been administered in food, perhaps, rather than drink?" Finch frowned, adjusting his spectacles. "Possible, but unlikely. Aconite is bitter in large amounts. Tea or coffee would mask it better. The steward brought Hargrove tea last night, around 8, I believe." Poirot nodded, his mind latching onto the detail. "And this tea, it was prepared in the galley?" Finch confirmed with a nod. "By the steward, young Tompkins, a nervous lad, but reliable." Poirot made a mental note to speak with Tompkins, whose role in delivering the tea placed him perilously close to the crime. "Merci, Doctor," Poirot said, dismissing Finch with a wave. "Your assistance is most valuable." Alone again, Poirot stood at the desk, his hands clasped behind his back. The navigation room was a microcosm of order disrupted, its clues pointing to a deliberate act. The smudged chart suggested haste or distraction, the broken compass, a symbolic gesture, the hidden map, a plan not yet fulfilled. The poison, elusive in its delivery, was the key to the method, but the motive remained shrouded. Was it ambition, as Blake's restless demeanor suggested? Authority challenged, as Thorne's guarded responses hinted? Or a personal vendetta, veiled by Miss Langston's poised exterior? Poirot's gaze returned to the compass, its crimson needle a silent witness. "You saw the truth, mon ami," he whispered to it, as if addressing Hargrove himself, "and someone ensured you would guide no more." He straightened, his resolve firm. The SS Meridian sailed on, but its course was now a labyrinth, and Poirot was its navigator. He would return to this room, he knew, but first he must probe deeper into the lives of those who crossed Hargrove's path. The truth, like a star in the daylight, was there, waiting for his little gray cells to bring it into focus. Chapter 4. The Captain's Secret. The SS Meridian steamed steadily through the Atlantic, its decks humming with the subdued rhythm of a ship under strain. The sky had darkened, heavy with clouds that promised a storm, and the passengers, sensing the unease that followed Edward Hargrove's death, kept to their cabins or whispered in tight clusters in the lounge. Hercule Poirot, undaunted by the gathering tempest, sat in the ship's dining saloon, a grand space of crystal chandeliers and starched linens, though now it felt more like a stage for unspoken tensions. His small frame was erect, his mustache a perfect crescent, and his gray eyes, sharp as cut glass, observed the room with relentless precision. The broken compass and the poison lingered in his mind, but it was the human heart, its secrets, its frailties, that he sought to unravel now. Captain Reginald Thorne had agreed to meet Poirot again, this time in the more public setting of the saloon, where the clink of teacups and the murmur of conversation provided a veneer of normalcy. Thorne entered, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his uniform impeccable, but his face betraying a weariness that had not been there before. He sat opposite Poirot, his hands resting heavily on the table, as if anchoring himself against an unseen current. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, his voice gruff but controlled, "I trust your investigation progresses. The crew is restless, and the passengers are asking questions I cannot answer." Poirot inclined his head, his expression courteous but probing. "The truth, Captain, is like the sea. It reveals itself in layers. I wish to discuss Monsieur Hargrove's error, the one you mentioned. A navigational mistake, you said, near the Azores. Tell me more, s'il vous plaît." Thorne's jaw tightened and his fingers twitched, a gesture Poirot had noted before. "It was a month ago," Thorne said, his tone clipped. "Hargrove miscalculated our position, set us on a course that would have taken us into a squall. I caught it during my review and ordered a correction. He complied, and we avoided trouble. That's all there is to it." Poirot's pen moved swiftly across his notebook, though his eyes never left Thorne's face. "And yet, Captain, such an error from a man of Hargrove's experience, it is unusual, non? Did it provoke a quarrel between you?" Thorne's eyes flickered, a storm cloud passing over them. "No quarrel," he said firmly. "I reprimanded him, as is my duty. He accepted it. Hargrove was a professional." But Poirot noted the slight reddening of Thorne's ears, a telltale sign of discomfort. "You did not, perhaps, question his competence? A captain relies on his navigator, as the ship relies on its keel." Thorne leaned back, his hands clenching briefly. "I trusted Hargrove," he said, though the words seemed to cost him effort. "He'd served under me for years. One mistake doesn't undo that." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And last evening, Captain, you were in your quarters, reviewing logs. We? Alone?" Thorne confirmed with a curt nod. "From 8 until 10, then I slept. My steward can vouch for my presence." Poirot made a note, his mind already probing the gaps in Thorne's account. A steward's testimony could be swayed, and the captain's quarters were close to the navigation room. Too close, perhaps, for comfort. The conversation paused as a waiter delivered tea, the porcelain cups clinking softly. Poirot sipped delicately, his eyes never leaving Thorne. "The compass, Captain. Its destruction intrigues me. You saw it intact during your afternoon visit. Did Hargrove ever speak of its significance?" Thorne frowned, as if the question caught him off guard. "He was proud of it," he admitted. "Said it was a gift from a mentor, crafted in London. He kept it polished, always on his desk. I didn't think much of it until it was broken." His voice trailed off, and Poirot noted a flicker of unease, as if Thorne regretted his candor. Later that evening, Poirot sought out the captain's quarters, a compact space adorned with nautical charts and a single photograph of a stern-faced woman, likely Thorne's mother. The logbook, left open on a small desk, drew Poirot's attention. He had requested to examine it, and Thorne, though reluctant, had consented. The entries were meticulous, detailing the ship's course, weather, and crew assignments. But one page, dated a month prior, caught Poirot's eye. Hargrove's name was circled in red ink with a terse note. "Error noted. Correction ordered." The handwriting was Thorne's, the ink bold and deliberate. Beside it, a faint pencil mark read, "Trust questioned." Poirot's lips pursed. "Trust," he murmured, "is a fragile thing. To question it is to plant a seed of discord." He closed the logbook, his mind racing. Thorne had downplayed the incident, but the circled name suggested more than a passing reprimand. Had Hargrove's mistake threatened Thorne's authority, or was there a deeper grievance? Poirot recalled the captain's twitching fingers, his guarded eyes. A man of Thorne's stature would not easily forgive a challenge to his command, even an unintentional one. Yet murder required more than wounded pride. It required intent, opportunity, and a heart cold enough to act. Poirot left the quarters and made his way to the deck, where the night air was sharp with the scent of salt and impending rain. He stood by the railing, the sea a dark mirror below, and considered the other suspects. Samuel Blake, with his restless ambition, had the means to poison Hargrove's tea, and his presence on deck offered only a partial alibi. Miss Clara Langston, with her poised demeanor and vague motives, remained an enigma. Her visit to Hargrove hinted at a connection beyond curiosity. But what? And the compass, its deliberate destruction, suggested a message, but to whom? A steward approached, a young man with a nervous gait. "Monsieur Poirot, the captain asked me to check if you needed anything." Poirot turned, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are Tompkins, oui? The one who brought Monsieur Hargrove's tea last night?" The boy nodded, his face pale. "Yes, sir. I left it on his desk at 8, like always." Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "And you saw nothing unusual? No one else in the room?" Tompkins shook his head. "Just Mr. Hargrove, sir. He was at his charts, muttering to himself. I didn't stay long." Poirot dismissed the boy with a nod, his mind latching onto the detail. Muttering, Hargrove had been distracted, perhaps agitated. Was it Miss Langston's visit or something else? The captain's secret, the circled name, the questioned trust, loomed large. Thorne had opportunity, access to the navigation room, and a motive, however veiled. But Poirot knew better than to leap to conclusions. "The heart of a man," he said softly to the sea, "is a chart with hidden reefs. I must navigate carefully." He returned to the saloon where the passengers had dispersed, leaving only the faint clink of glasses being cleared. Poirot sat, his notebook open, and sketched a mental map of the case. The captain's secret was a thread, but it was not the only one. Blake's ambition, Langston's mystery, the poison's path, all converged on the broken compass, its crimson needle a silent cry for justice. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, Hercule," he told himself. "The truth will surface as surely as the tide." Chapter 5. The crew member's ambition. The SS Meridian pressed onward through the Atlantic, its hull groaning faintly as the sea grew rougher, the horizon swallowed by a shroud of gathering clouds. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the ship's restless motion, descended to the lower decks, where the air was thick with the scent of oil and steel. The engine room, a labyrinth of pipes and pistons, thrummed with the heartbeat of the vessel, a stark contrast to the polished elegance of the upper decks. Here, among the machinery, Poirot sought Samuel Blake, the wiry crew member whose sharp eyes and quick tongue had already marked him as a man of ambition and perhaps of secrets. The death of Edward Hargrove, the broken compass, the poison, all pointed to a motive rooted in the human heart, and Poirot was determined to uncover it. Blake was found near a massive boiler, his sleeves rolled up, his hands blackened with grease as he tightened a valve. The din of the engines was relentless, but Blake's movements were precise, almost defiant, as if he drew strength from the chaos. He glanced up as Poirot approached, his expression a mix of irritation and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, his voice carrying the rough edge of the docks. "Come to poke around the guts of the ship, have you? Not much to see down here but sweat and steel." Poirot smiled faintly, his mustache a perfect arc despite the humid air. "The heart of a ship, Monsieur Blake, is not only in its engines but in the men who drive it. You, I think, are a man with a vision, a man who looks beyond the horizon. Oui?" Blake's eyes narrowed, and he tossed the rag aside, crossing his arms. "What's that supposed to mean? I do my job, same as anyone. You want to talk about Hargrove? Let's talk. I've got work to do." Poirot gestured to a nearby crate, inviting Blake to sit, though the crew member remained standing, his posture tense. "You were Monsieur Hargrove's assistant," Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing, cutting through the engine's roar. "A position of trust, yet also of shadow, no? To stand always in another's light, it must chafe for a man of your talents." Blake's lips twitched, a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Hargrove was good at his job," he said. "Taught me everything, charts, stars, the lot. But he was old, set in his ways, took his time with things. Me, I'm quicker, always have been." Poirot's pen scratched lightly in his notebook, though his gaze never wavered. "And this quickness, it makes you valuable, oui? Perhaps valuable enough to take Hargrove's place?" Blake's smirk faded, replaced by a flash of defiance. "I didn't need him dead to prove myself," he snapped. "I'd have been navigator one day, fair and square. Captain knows I'm good. Ask anyone on the crew." His voice was firm, but Poirot noted the way. His fingers drummed against his arm, a restless rhythm that betrayed unease. "Tell me again of last night," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "You were on deck, repairing rigging, you said, near the foremast until midnight. A long shift, none?" Blake nodded, his eyes flicking to the side. "Aye, storm's coming. Lines needed checking. I wasn't alone. Half the deck crew was out there fixing things. Ask them." Poirot made a note, recalling the sketch he'd found in the navigation room, marked midnight near the foremast. Blake's alibi was convenient, but alibis, Poirot knew, were like charts, useful until proven false. "You brought Monsieur Hargrove his tea at 8, Poirot continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You left it on his desk, you said. Did you linger, perhaps, to speak with him?" Blake shook his head, his jaw tight. "Dropped it and left. He was hunched over his charts, muttering about some course change. Didn't even look up. I had work to do." Poirot's pen paused. "A course change? He spoke of this?" Blake shrugged, as if it were trivial. "Said someone wanted to tweak the route. Didn't say who. I didn't care. My job's to follow orders, not question them." Poirot's mind seized the detail, connecting it to the logbook's note. "Course adjustment requested, refused." Had Miss Langston's visit prompted this, or was another player at work? He leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "Monsieur Blake, you are a man of ambition. Oui? A man who sees the navigator's chair and dreams of sitting in it. Hargrove's death. It clears your path, does it not?" Blake's face darkened, his hands clenching. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. I liked Hargrove. He was a pain sometimes, but I didn't kill him. You've got no proof." Poirot raised a hand, placating but firm. "Proof, monsieur, is like a star. It shines when the night is darkest. Let us speak of the compass. You called it gaudy, yet it was Hargrove's pride. Did you ever touch it?" Blake's eyes flickered, a shadow passing over them. "Never. It was his toy, not mine. I use the standard ones. Don't need fancy needles to find north." His tone was dismissive, but Poirot noted a faint sheen of sweat on his brow, despite the cool air. The detective changed tack, his voice casual but probing. "You are well liked among the crew, I hear. A leader, perhaps, in your own way. Have you ever spoken of changes in command? A desire for a different captain, peut-être?" Blake's posture stiffened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "What are you getting at? I do my job, keep my head down. Crew talks, sure, but that's just talk. Thorne's tough, but he's fair. Nobody's planning a mutiny, if that's what you're thinking." His denial was swift, but Poirot caught the slight hesitation, the way Blake's gaze darted to the engine room's shadows. Poirot closed his notebook, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Monsieur Blake. You have been most illuminating." Blake snorted, turning back to his work. "Find your killer, Poirot. It ain't me." As Poirot ascended to the upper decks, the engine's roar faded, but Blake's words echoed in his mind. The crew member's ambition was palpable, a fire burning beneath his rough exterior. The tea, the foremast, the talk of a course, change. These were threads in a tapestry, and Blake was woven into it. Back in the lounge, Poirot sought out a crew member, a grizzled sailor named Jenkins, who had served on the Meridian for a decade. Over a glass of brandy, Jenkins spoke freely, his voice low. "Blake's a sharp one," he said, his eyes wary. "Always talking big, saying he'd run the ship better than Thorne. Heard him once, late at night, trying to rile up a few lads. Said the captain was too rigid, that we could make more money on private runs if someone else took the helm. Hargrove overheard, told him to shut it. Blake didn't like that." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this talk, it continued?" Jenkins shrugged. "Not that I heard, but Blake's not one to let go of a grudge." The revelation was a spark in Poirot's mind. A mutiny, even in its infancy, required control of the ship's course and its navigator. Hargrove's loyalty to Thorne made him an obstacle, and his death a convenience. The broken compass, Poirot mused, could be a symbol of disrupted order, a signal to the crew that authority could be challenged. But Blake's alibi, supported by the deck crew, needed testing. And the tea, had Blake tampered with it, or was he merely a link in the chain? Poirot stood, his small frame silhouetted against the lounge's portholes, where the sea churned under a darkening sky. "Ambition," he murmured, "is a tide that lifts or drowns. Monsieur Blake, you dream of steering the ship, but at what cost?" The case was a labyrinth, its paths twisting through human desires. Poirot would follow them, step by step, until the truth lay bare. Chapter 6. The Passengers Passed. The SS Meridian sailed on, its prow slicing through the Atlantic's restless waves as the sky above grew heavy with the threat of a storm. The ship's elegance, with its polished brass and gleaming wood, seemed at odds with the undercurrent of unease that now permeated its corridors. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer of human nature, sat in the ship's library, a quiet enclave of leather-bound volumes and soft lamplight, far removed from the engine's clamor or the dining saloon's chatter. His small hands rested on the arms of a chair, his mustache immaculate, but his gray eyes burned with the intensity of a man piecing together a mosaic of motives. The death of Edward Hargrove, the shattered compass, the poison, all pointed to a crime rooted in secrets, and Poirot was determined to uncover the truth hidden in the enigmatic Miss Clara Langston. Clara had intrigued him from their first meeting, her poised demeanor a polished surface that hinted at depths unseen. Her claim of visiting Hargrove to discuss the ship's route and constellations had been plausible, yet Poirot sensed a careful curation in her words, as if she navigated her story with the precision of a charted course. He had arranged to meet her again, this time in the library, where the quiet would allow his questions, to cut through her defenses like a sextant through fog. As he waited, he reviewed his notes, the faint scratch of his pen a rhythm to his thoughts. The smudged chart, the broken compass, the sketch marked midnight. Each clue was a star in the constellation of the crime, and Clara's role remained elusive. She entered precisely on time, her auburn hair catching the lamplight, her green dress a subtle elegance that spoke of taste and restraint. She carried herself with the grace of a woman accustomed to scrutiny, yet her hazel eyes held a guarded quality, like windows shuttered against a storm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but clear as she took the seat opposite him. "You wish to speak with me again. I hope I can be of further assistance." Her smile was polite, but Poirot noted the slight tension in her posture, the way her gloved hands rested too still in her lap. "Merci, Mademoiselle Langston," Poirot replied, his tone courteous but probing. "You are most gracious to indulge me. I wish to understand you better, for in a murder, every soul aboard is a piece of the puzzle. You spoke of your interest in navigation, inspired by your father, a naval officer, oui?" Clara nodded, her expression serene. "Yes, my father was Captain Henry Langston. He taught me to read charts and follow the stars, though I never sailed with him. It was a personal passion, you might say." Her voice was steady, but Poirot caught a fleeting shadow in her eyes, a hint of something unspoken. He leaned forward slightly, his pen poised over his notebook. "This passion, it brought you to Monsieur Hargrove's navigation room. You asked about the ship's route, the constellations. But I wonder, mademoiselle, if there was more to your visit." Hargrove's log noted a course adjustment requested, refused. "Was this your request?" Clara's lips parted slightly, a flicker of surprise before her composure returned. "I did ask about our route," she admitted, "but only out of curiosity. I suggested we might adjust slightly to avoid a storm I'd read about in a meteorological report. Mr. Hargrove said it wasn't necessary. He was polite, but firm." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained. "A storm, you say? You are well informed, mademoiselle, for a passenger. Most would leave such matters to the crew." Clara's fingers tightened briefly on her gloves, a gesture so subtle it might have escaped a less observant eye. "My father's teachings," she said, "made me attentive to such things. I meant no offense." Poirot nodded, his mind latching onto the detail. Her story aligned with Hargrove's note, but the specificity of her request intrigued him. Was it truly curiosity, or a pretext for something deeper? He changed tack, his voice soft but relentless. "Your father, Captain Langston, he was a man of distinction. Oui? Yet I have heard whispers, mademoiselle, that his career ended in misfortune. A matter of falsified charts, perhaps?" Clara's face paled, though she held his gaze. "You are well informed yourself, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her tone cool but not cold. "My father was dismissed from the Navy, yes. A navigational error was blamed on him, though he swore it was not his doing. It ruined him. He died shortly after, a broken man." Her voice trembled slightly, the first crack in her poised facade. Poirot's expression softened, but his questions pressed on. "And Monsieur Hargrove, did he know your father? Perhaps they served together?" Clara shook her head, her eyes steady again. "Not that I know of. I sought Mr. Hargrove only because of my interest in navigation. There was no personal connection." Yet Poirot's instincts stirred. Her denial was swift, but the tremor in her voice lingered in his mind, like a faint echo of truth. He rose, pacing slowly before the bookshelves, his hands clasped behind his back. "Permit me a hypothesis, mademoiselle. A woman such as yourself, with a father wronged by his profession, might seek answers, non? Perhaps you hoped Hargrove, a seasoned navigator, could shed light on your father's disgrace." Clara's eyes followed him, her expression unreadable. "You weave an interesting tale, Monsieur Poirot, but I sought no such thing. My visit was brief, my purpose simple. I left Mr. Hargrove alive, and I know nothing of his death." Poirot paused, turning to face her. "And the compass, mademoiselle? You remarked on its crimson needle. Did it strike you as significant?" Clara tilted her head, considering. "It was beautiful, a craftsman's work. Mr. Hargrove said it was a gift, a token of his early days at sea. I thought it charming, nothing more." Her words were smooth, but Poirot noted the way her hands smoothed her dress, a nervous gesture cloaked in elegance. He returned to his seat, his notebook open. "One final question, mademoiselle. You travel alone, which is uncommon. Your purpose in New York? Family, you said, yet you are reticent about details. Why?" Clara's smile was faint, almost wistful. "A private matter, Monsieur Poirot, a cousin in need of support. I prefer not to burden others with my affairs." Her answer was polite, but Poirot sensed a wall, a boundary she would not let him cross. As she rose to leave, Poirot's gaze lingered on her retreating figure, her grace a contrast to the turmoil of the case. He closed his notebook, his mind a whirl of connections. Clara's past, tied to her father's disgrace, suggested a motive rooted in vengeance or redemption, yet her composure was nearly flawless. The course adjustment, the compass, her guarded secrets, all pointed to a woman who knew more than she revealed. But was she a killer, or merely a passenger caught in the storm of another's crime? Poirot stepped onto the deck, the night air sharp with salt and the promise of rain. The stars were hidden, but his mind traced their patterns. "The past," he murmured, "is a shadow that follows us. Mademoiselle Langston, what shadow do you carry?" The Meridian sailed on, its course steady, but its secrets uncharted. Poirot would navigate them, one clue at a time. Chapter 7. The Poison's Path. The SS Meridian pressed forward through the Atlantic's churning waves, the sky now a brooding canopy of slate-gray clouds that mirrored the tension aboard. The ship's grandeur, its polished brass, its velvet-draped lounges, seemed to mock the grim reality of Edward Hargrove's murder, a crime that had cast a shadow over every deck. Hercule Poirot, his small frame a study in precision, moved through the ship with the quiet determination of a man charting an unseen course. The broken compass, the smudged chart, the whispered ambitions and guarded pasts, all were pieces in a puzzle, but the poison, that silent harbinger of death, was the thread Poirot now sought to trace. Its path, he knew, would lead him closer to the killer's heart. He descended to the ship's galley, a bustling domain of gleaming pots and the sharp scent of herbs, where the crew prepared meals with the efficiency of a well-drilled regiment. The galley was a hub of activity, yet it held a crucial clue, the means by which aconite had reached Hargrove's lips. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly on the tiled floor as he entered, his gray eyes scanning the space with the intensity of a lighthouse beam. The head cook, a stout man named Mr. Gibbs, wiped flour from his hands and approached, his face a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice gruff but respectful. "Captain said you'd be sniffing around. What's this about, then?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Monsieur Gibbs, the galley is the heart of a ship's sustenance. Oui? And sustenance, I fear, may have carried death to Monsieur Hargrove. Tell me, who prepares the tea for the navigation room?" Gibbs gestured to a corner where a young steward, Tompkins, was scrubbing a pot with nervous energy. That'd be Tompkins, sir. He's the one takes tea to the officers, Hargrove included, every evening, like clockwork. Poirot approached the boy, who looked up with wide, anxious eyes. Tompkins was no more than 20, his face pale and freckled, his hands trembling slightly as he set the pot aside. "Monsieur Tompkins," Poirot said, his voice gentle but commanding. "You brought tea to Monsieur Hargrove last night, oui? At 8 o'clock?" Tompkins nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Yes, sir. Black tea, strong, no sugar, just how he liked it. I left it on his desk and came straight back here." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his tone remained soft. "And you prepared this tea yourself? No one assisted you?" Tompkins shook his head vigorously. "No, sir. I boiled the water, steeped the leaves, same as always, poured it into the pot and took it up. Nobody touched it but me." Poirot noted the boy's earnestness, but also the way his eyes darted to the side, as if fearing scrutiny. "And the tea leaves, the sugar, where are they kept?" Poirot asked, his gaze sweeping the galley's shelves. Gibbs pointed to a row of tin canisters along a high shelf, labeled with neat precision: tea, coffee, sugar, spices. Poirot stepped closer, his small frame dwarfed by the towering cook, and examined the canisters. The tea tin was unremarkable, its contents fragrant but ordinary. The sugar tin, however, caught his attention. He lifted its lid, revealing fine white granules, and tucked beneath a false bottom a small paper packet, its edge stained with a faint yellow powder. Poirot's gloved fingers extracted it carefully, his nose detecting the acrid scent of aconite. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the poison hides in plain sight." Gibbs's face reddened, his hands clenching. "What's that, then? I swear, monsieur, nobody in my galley would—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Gibbs. The presence of poison does not indict your staff, but it raises questions. Who has access to this galley?" Gibbs hesitated, then listed the cooks, stewards, and officers who frequented the space. "Captain Thorne checks supplies now and then," he added. "Mr. Blake's in here often, grabbing a bite or fetching tea for Hargrove. Passengers, though, they don't come down here." Poirot's mind raced, the packet a weighty clue in his hand. Samuel Blake, with his restless ambition, had easy access to the galley. Captain Thorne, too, could have tampered with the sugar, though his visits were less frequent. Miss Clara Langston, however, was an outlier. Her presence in the galley would have been noticed, remarked upon. Yet the poison's placement suggested premeditation, a plan hatched by someone familiar with the ship's routines. "Monsieur Tompkins," Poirot said, turning to the steward, "when you prepared the tea, did you use sugar?" The boy shook his head. "No, sir. Mr. Hargrove never took sugar. Just the tea, plain." Poirot nodded, slipping the packet into a handkerchief. "Merci, gentlemen. This packet will be examined by Dr. Finch. For now, say nothing of this discovery." Gibbs and Tompkins exchanged uneasy glances, but they nodded. As Poirot left the galley, the clang of pots fading behind him, he considered the poison's path. Aconite in the sugar tin suggested a plan to poison anyone, not just Hargrove. Unless the killer knew Hargrove's habits, knew he took his tea plain. The absence of a cup or pot in the navigation room puzzled him further. Had the killer removed it to hide evidence, or had Hargrove consumed the poison elsewhere? He sought out Dr. Finch in the infirmary, a sterile room of white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. Finch, adjusting his spectacles, examined the packet with a frown. Aconite, no doubt. he said, sniffing cautiously. A small dose, mixed in liquid, would kill in minutes. No taste to betray it, especially in strong tea. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the quantity here, Doctor. Enough for one victim or many? Finch hesitated, then shook his head. Enough for several, I'd wager. Whoever hid it meant business. The revelation tightened the knot of the case. A surplus of poison suggested either a reckless plan or a broader intent, perhaps to sow chaos beyond Hargrove's death. Poirot's thoughts turned to Blake, whose access to the galley and ambition made him a prime suspect. Yet Thorne's authority and Langston's mysterious visit could not be dismissed. The poison's path was clear in its mechanics, hidden in the galley, likely mixed into tea. But its purpose remained obscured. Was it mutiny, vengeance, or something yet unseen? Poirot ascended to the deck, the wind sharp with salt and the first drops of rain. The sea stretched endlessly before him, its surface a mirror of the mystery's depths. "The poison," he murmured, "is but the weapon. The motive is the hand that wields it." He clutched his notebook, the packet of aconite, a silent witness in his pocket. The Meridian sailed on, but its course was fraught with secrets, and Poirot was its compass, seeking the truth in the storm. Chapter 8. The Broken Compass. The SS. Meridian plowed through the Atlantic, its decks slick with the first lashings of a gathering storm. The air was taut with the scent of rain and salt, and the ship's passengers, sensing the unrest both meteorological and human, retreated to their cabins, leaving the corridors eerily quiet. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the mounting tempest, stood once more in the navigation room, where the ghost of Edward Hargrove's murder lingered like a fog. The room, with its orderly charts and silent instruments, was a shrine to precision, yet the broken compass on the desk, its crimson needle snapped, its glass shattered, mocked that order with its mute accusation. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as a blade, fixed on the compass, for it was more than a tool. It was a symbol, a clue to the killer's mind, and he was determined to decipher its message. The room was as he had left it, sealed by Captain Thorne's orders, its air heavy with the scent of ink and polished wood. The porthole admitted a gray light, casting shadows that danced with the ship's gentle sway. Poirot approached the desk, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his small frame a study in concentration. The compass, Hargrove's prized possession, lay at the edge, its brass casing dulled by the violence done to it. The glass was not merely cracked but pulverized, shards scattered like stars across the desk and floor. The crimson needle, a rare flourish in a utilitarian world, was broken cleanly at its pivot, no longer seeking north, but pointing to oblivion. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice a whisper in the stillness. "To destroy such a thing is not mere anger. It is a statement, a gesture of defiance or of concealment." He knelt, examining the shards with care, noting their distribution. Some had fallen to the floor, others clung to the desk's edge, suggesting the compass was struck where it stood. The force required was considerable, more than a casual blow, and Poirot's mind turned to the sequence of events. Had Hargrove been poisoned first, collapsing lifeless, only for the killer to shatter the compass as a final act? Or was the compass broken in a moment of rage before the poison took hold? The absence of struggle, as Dr. Finch had noted, suggested the former, but Poirot knew appearances could deceive. He rose, his gaze sweeping the room for new clues. The smudged chart, the hidden sketch marked midnight, the aconite packet from the galley, all were threads in the tapestry, but the compass was the centerpiece. Poirot recalled Blake's dismissive remark, calling it gaudy, and Clara Langston's observation of its beauty, a gift from Hargrove's mentor. Captain Thorne, too, had noted its presence, intact during his afternoon visit. Yet its destruction was deliberate, a message that echoed beyond the navigation room. "What do you say, mon ami?" Poirot asked the compass softly, as if it could answer. "Do you point to ambition, to vengeance, or to something deeper?" Seeking answers, Poirot sought out the ship's engineer, Mr. Harrow, a grizzled man with hands scarred from years of wrestling machinery. They met in the engine room, where the roar of pistons provided a stark contrast to the navigation room's quiet. Harrow, wiping sweat from his brow, listened as Poirot described the compass. "Aye, I knew it," Harrow said, his voice rough but clear. "Hargrove showed it to me once. Custom-made," he said, "by a London craftsman. Crimson needle, set in a pivot so fine it could find north in a gale. Worth a pretty penny, too." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And to break it, Monsieur Harrow, what would it take?" The engineer rubbed his chin. "A good swing with something heavy, a wrench, maybe, or a mallet. Glass like that don't shatter easy. Whoever did it meant business." The information sharpened Poirot's focus. A wrench or mallet suggested access to tools, common for a crew member like Blake, less so for Thorne or Langston. Yet the act itself puzzled him. If Hargrove was already dead, why destroy the compass? To delay the ship's progress, perhaps, by sowing confusion. Or to symbolize the end of Hargrove's guidance, a taunt to the captain's authority? Poirot thanked Harrow and returned to the upper decks, the storm's first raindrops pattering against his coat. In the lounge, he found a quiet corner and opened his notebook, sketching the compass's image in his mind. Its crimson needle, Hargrove's pride, was a beacon of his skill, a link to his past. To break it was to sever that link, to declare his legacy void. Poirot's thoughts turned to Blake, whose ambition burned like a coal. The crew member's presence on deck, his access to the galley, his dismissive tone, all pointed to a man eager to rise, perhaps at any cost. Yet Thorne's guarded secret, the circled name in the logbook, suggested a captain who might see Hargrove's death as a means to restore trust in his command. And Clara Langston, with her shadowed past, could she have struck at Hargrove for reasons tied to her father's disgrace? Poirot closed his notebook, the rain now a steady drum against the portholes. The compass was more than a clue. It was a mirror reflecting the killer's intent. "You were broken for a purpose," he whispered, as if addressing the compass itself. "But I, Hercule Poirot, shall restore your direction." The Meridian sailed on, its course steady, but its heart troubled. Poirot would follow the compass's silent cry, through the storm to the truth. Chapter 9. The Mutiny Revealed. The SS Meridian forged ahead through the Atlantic, its decks now lashed by a storm that roared with the fury of unleashed secrets. Rain battered the portholes, and the ship's timbers groaned as if echoing the unrest that had taken root among its crew and passengers. Hercule Poirot, his small frame a beacon of calm amid the tempest, sat in the ship's chart room, a smaller annex to the navigation room where spare maps and instruments were stored. The air was thick with the scent of damp paper and wax, but Poirot's mind was sharp, his gray eyes gleaming as he pieced together the threads of Edward Hargrove's murder. The broken compass, The aconite in the galley, the smudged chart, and the sketch marked midnight had all pointed to a crime of calculated intent. But now a new thread emerged, a whisper of mutiny that cast a shadow over the ship's hierarchy. Poirot had spent the morning discreetly observing the crew, their glances and hushed conversations betraying a tension deeper than mere grief for Hargrove. His inquiries had led him to Mr. Jenkins, the grizzled sailor, who had hinted at Samuel Blake's discontent. Poirot arranged to meet Jenkins in the chart room, away from prying ears, under the guise of discussing navigational tools. Jenkins entered, his weathered face etched with caution, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his worn jacket. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and rough as gravel, "you wanted to see me. I don't know what more I can tell you, but I'll speak plain if you ask it." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache a perfect crescent in the dim light. "Monsieur Jenkins, you are a man of experience, oui? You see the currents beneath the surface, the unspoken tides among the crew. You spoke of Monsieur Blake's ambition, his talk of a different captain. I wish to know more. Was there a plan, perhaps a mutiny?" Jenkins's eyes widened briefly, then narrowed, his jaw tightening. He glanced at the door, ensuring it was closed before leaning closer. "You're a sharp one, sir," he said. "Aye, there was talk. Not loud, mind you, but enough to make a man uneasy. Blake's been stirring the pot for weeks, saying Thorne's too strict, too by the book. Said we could make more coin on private runs. Smuggling, maybe, if we had a captain who'd look the other way." Poirot's pen moved swiftly across his notebook, though his gaze remained fixed on Jenkins. "And Monsieur Hargrove, did he hear this talk?" Jenkins nodded, his expression grim. "He did. Couple of weeks back, Blake was in the crew mess, spinning his tales to a few lads. Hargrove walked in, heard enough to know it wasn't just grumbling, told Blake to shut his trap or he'd report it to the captain. Blake laughed it off, but his eyes were hard. Hargrove was loyal to Thorne, see? Wouldn't stand for that kind of talk." Poirot's mind seized the revelation, a spark igniting the pattern of clues. Hargrove's loyalty made him a barrier to Blake's ambitions, a man who could expose a mutiny before it took root. The broken compass, a symbol of Hargrove's authority, could have been shattered to signal chaos, a rallying cry for discontented crewmen. "This talk of mutiny," Poirot pressed, his voice soft but relentless. "Did it continue after Hargrove's warning?" Jenkins shrugged, his eyes darting to the shadows. "Not that I heard, but Blake's clever. He'd keep it quiet after that. Only a fool would speak open treason with Hargrove around." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "And the crew, Monsieur Jenkins? How many shared Blake's views?" Jenkins hesitated, then shook his head. "A few, maybe. Young lads, mostly, hungry for quick money. But most of us know better. Thorne's tough, but he's fair. A mutiny's a mad gamble, and Blake's no captain." Poirot nodded, filing away the names Jenkins mentioned. 2 deckhands, Riley and Carter, who had lingered near Blake during breaks. "Merci, Monsieur Jenkins," he said, his tone dismissing but kind. "Your candor lights the path to truth. Say nothing of this, s'il vous plaît." As Jenkins left, Poirot remained in the chart room, his thoughts a whirl of connections. Blake's mutinous talk provided a motive for Hargrove's murder. A navigator loyal to the captain was an obstacle, a voice that could betray the plan. The aconite in the galley, accessible to Blake, suggested a method, and the broken compass could be a deliberate act to sow confusion, delaying the ship's progress and giving Blake time to rally support. Yet doubts lingered. Blake's alibi, supported by the deck crew, needed scrutiny, and the poison's surplus quantity hinted at a broader intent. Could Captain Thorne, aware of dissent, have acted to protect his command? Or did Clara Langston's visit to Hargrove conceal a motive tied to her shadowed past? Poirot rose, his small frame moving with purpose as he ascended to the deck. The storm raged, rain lashing the planks, but he stood at the railing, his coat damp but his resolve unshaken. The sketch marked midnight near the foremast where Blake claimed to have been, loomed large in his mind. Was it a meeting place for conspirators or a red herring? He recalled the faint tobacco scent on Blake's clothes, a detail that nagged at him. The crew mess, where Jenkins heard Blake's talk, was near the galley. Perhaps Blake had lingered there, tampering with the tea or planting the aconite. Poirot's gaze turned to the sea, its waves a mirror of the case's complexity. "A mutiny," he murmured, "is a rebellion against order, and the compass was its symbol. Monsieur Blake, you dream of steering the ship, but have you steered yourself to ruin?" The Meridian pressed on, its course a battle against the storm and the secrets within. Poirot, with his little gray cells, would navigate both, until the truth emerged like a beacon in the night. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The SS Meridian battled through the Atlantic storm, its decks awash with rain, and the air electric with the tension of secrets laid bare. The ship's grand saloon, usually a haven of crystal and conversation, was now a stage for Hercule Poirot's denouement. The chandeliers swayed faintly with the ship's motion, casting flickering shadows on the polished walls, as if mirroring the unease among those gathered. Poirot stood at the head of the long oak table, his small frame commanding the room with the quiet authority of truth. His mustache was impeccable, his gray eyes alight with the clarity that comes when the pieces of a puzzle finally align. The broken compass, the aconite, the smudged chart, the whispers of mutiny, all had led to this moment where the killer's mask would be stripped away. Captain Reginald Thorne sat at one end of the table, his broad shoulders rigid, his weathered face a mask of controlled apprehension. Samuel Blake slouched in his chair, his sharp eyes darting between Poirot and the door, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. Miss Clara Langston, composed in her green dress, sat with hands folded, her hazel eyes calm but watchful. The ship's officers and a few trusted crewmen, including Jenkins, stood along the walls, their presence a silent testament to the gravity of the hour. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was soft but resonant, cutting through the distant howl of the storm. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we are gathered to unravel the murder of Edward Hargrove, a crime that has shaken this ship to its core. The truth, like a star in the storm, is now visible, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal it." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sweeping the room. Monsieur Hargrove was poisoned with aconite, a swift and silent killer, administered in his tea at 8 o'clock. The compass, his cherished tool with its crimson needle, was shattered, not in anger, but with purpose. This was no random act, but a crime woven from ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. He paused, letting the words settle like dust. "Let us consider the suspects. Captain Thorne, a man of authority, had a rift with Hargrove over a navigational error. Mademoiselle Langston, with her shadowed past, sought Hargrove's aid for reasons unclear, and Monsieur Blake, the ambitious assistant, stood to gain the navigator's role. But only one of you held the thread of motive and opportunity. Poirot turned to Blake, whose smirk had faded, replaced by a tense wariness. Monsieur Blake, you are a man of dreams. Oui? Dreams of command, of wealth, of a ship steered by your hand. You spoke of mutiny, whispering to the crew of private runs and riches under a new captain. Hargrove, loyal to Thorn, heard these words and threatened to expose you. His death removed that threat, did it not? Blake's face paled, his hands clenching. You're mad, Poirot. I was on deck, fixing rigging. The crew saw me. I didn't touch Hargrove. Poirot raised a hand, his voice steady. Your alibi is noted, but alibis, like charts, can mislead. You brought Hargrove's tea at 8, left it on his desk. The aconite was found in the galley's sugar tin, where you, as a crewman, had easy access. And the compass, its glass was shattered, its needle broken. I found a shard of that glass on your boot, Monsieur Blake, dusted with the same fine powder as the navigation room floor. He produced a small envelope, holding it aloft. This shard, taken from your quarters, matches the compass precisely. The room stirred, murmurs rippling among the crew. Blake lunged to his feet, his voice rising. You've got nothing. That shard could have come from anywhere. Poirot's eyes gleamed, unyielding. Non, monsieur. The compass was struck after Hargrove's death to symbolize the chaos you sought, a mutiny to destabilize the ship. The sketch I found marked midnight near the foremast was your plan for a meeting, was it not? To rally your conspirators while the ship reeled from Hargrove's loss. Blake's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the door, but 2 crewmen stepped forward, blocking his path. Poirot turned to the others, his voice calm but relentless. Captain Thorn, your trust in Hargrove was shaken, but your motive was pride, not murder. Mademoiselle Langston, your visit to Hargrove was tied to your father's disgrace, a personal quest, not a crime. He faced Blake again, his tone final. You, Monsieur Blake, poisoned the tea, knowing Hargrove's habits. You broke the compass to sow confusion, to signal your intent. But you underestimated the order of Hercule Poirot's little gray cells. Blake's defiance crumbled, his shoulders slumping. All right, he muttered, his voice hoarse. I did it. Hargrove was going to ruin everything. I just wanted a chance, a real chance. The crew gasped, and Thorn's face darkened with fury. Poirot nodded, his expression somber. The truth, monsieur, is a compass that points true. You have lost your way. As Blake was led away, the saloon fell silent, the storm's roar a distant echo. Poirot stood alone, his notebook closed, the case resolved, but its weight lingering. The Meridian sailed on, its course restored, but the human heart, Poirot knew, would always chart its own perilous waters. Chapter 11. The Passenger's Truth. The SS Meridian pressed forward through the Atlantic, the storm's fury now a fading roar, though the sea still churned with restless waves. The ship's grand saloon, where Hercule Poirot had unmasked Samuel Blake as Edward Hargrove's killer, was now empty, its chandeliers still and its tables cleared. The air held a lingering tension, as if the echoes of Blake's confession clung to the polished walls. Poirot, his small frame as composed as ever, stood by a porthole, his gray eyes fixed on the horizon where the clouds parted to reveal a sliver of pale sky. The case was nearly closed, the mutiny thwarted, the broken compass explained, yet one thread remained loose. The enigma of Miss Clara Langston. Her poised demeanor, her guarded past, and her mysterious visit to Hargrove nagged at Poirot's meticulous mind. He would not rest until every shadow was illuminated. Poirot had requested Clara's presence in the ship's library, a quiet sanctuary of leather-bound books and soft lamplight, where the storm's distant rumble was a mere whisper. He sat at a small table, his notebook open, his fountain pen poised like a conductor's baton. Clara entered, her auburn hair catching the light, her green dress a subtle elegance that contrasted with the weight of the moment. She took the seat opposite him, her hazel eyes calm but watchful, her hands resting lightly in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft yet steady, "you have solved the mystery of Mr. Hargrove's death. I congratulate you. Why then do you wish to speak with me again?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "Mademoiselle Langston, the truth is like a chart. It must be complete, with every line drawn. You are a piece of this puzzle, though not the killer. Your visit to Monsieur Hargrove, your interest in the ship's route, your father's shadowed past, these are not mere coincidences, non? I seek the truth of your heart." Clara's lips parted slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before her composure returned. "You are persistent, monsieur," she said, her tone tinged with respect. "Very well. I will speak plainly, as you deserve." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You told me of your father, Captain Henry Langston, disgraced for falsified charts. You visited Hargrove, asking about the ship's route, citing a storm. Yet his log noted a course adjustment requested, refused. I have found, mademoiselle, a letter in your cabin, addressed to Hargrove, mentioning a debt and a promise. Explain this, s'il vous plaît." Clara's hands tightened briefly in her lap, the first sign of unease, though her gaze remained steady. "You are thorough," she said, her voice low. "Yes, I wrote that letter. I sought Mr. Hargrove not for idle curiosity, but for a purpose tied to my father." She paused, her eyes distant, as if gazing into a past she had long buried. "My father was dismissed from the Navy 20 years ago," she began. "He was blamed for a navigational error that led a ship aground. He swore it was not his fault, that another officer, his navigator, had altered the charts to cover his own mistake. That navigator was Edward Hargrove." Poirot's pen stilled, his mind seizing the revelation. "Hargrove?" he repeated, his voice soft but sharp. Clara nodded, her expression a mix of resolve and sorrow. "My father trained Hargrove, trusted him. When the scandal broke, Hargrove was young, just starting out. He let my father take the blame, and it destroyed him. My father died a year later, broken by shame." Poirot's eyes gleamed, the pieces aligning. "And you sought Hargrove to confront this past, oui? To demand the truth?" Clara's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "Not to confront, but to ask for a favor, a debt owed for my father's silence. I learned Hargrove was on this ship, and I booked passage to speak with him. I asked him to adjust the Meridian's course, not for a storm, but to pass near a small island where my father's ship ran aground. I wanted to see it, to lay a wreath in his memory, to find some peace. Hargrove refused, saying it was too far off course. He was kind, but firm, and I left it at that." Poirot nodded, his mind tracing the contours of her story. "And the letter, mademoiselle? The promise?" Clara's eyes softened, a glimmer of pain within them. "I wrote to Hargrove before we sailed, reminding him of my father's sacrifice, asking for his help as a promise kept. He never replied, but he agreed to see me. I thought, perhaps, he felt guilt, but he gave me no answers, only his refusal. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I did not harm him. His death shocked me as much as anyone. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Your story, mademoiselle, is a map of grief, and I believe it. The aconite, the broken compass. These were the work of Monsieur Blake, driven by ambition, not your quest for closure. He paused, his gaze softening. But why, then, did you not speak of this sooner? Clara's smile was wistful. Pride, perhaps, and fear that my father's name would be dragged through shame again. I wanted only to honor him, not to stir old wounds. Poirot closed his notebook, his expression one of quiet respect. Merci, Mademoiselle Langston. Your truth completes the chart. Your father's shadow is lifted, and you are free of suspicion. Clara rose, her posture lighter, as if a burden had been shed. Thank you, monsieur, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You have given me more than justice. She left the library, her steps soft but sure, a woman unmoored from her past. Poirot remained, his gaze on the rain-streaked porthole. Clara's truth had closed a circle, but the case's heart, the mutiny, the poison, the compass, belonged to Blake. The meridian sailed on, its storm fading, and Poirot felt the satisfaction of a puzzle nearly solved. The human heart, he murmured, is a sea of secrets, but the truth always rises. One chapter remained, and he would see it through. Chapter 12. The Resolution. The SS Meridian emerged from the storm's embrace, its decks glistening under a sky now clearing to reveal patches of pale blue. The Atlantic stretched vast and restless, but the ship sailed with renewed purpose, as if cleansed by the tempest. Hercule Poirot stood at the bow, his small frame steady against the wind, his mustache a perfect crescent, his gray eyes reflecting the sea's endless expanse. The murder of Edward Hargrove had been solved, Samuel Blake's confession sealing the case like a chart folded shut. Yet Poirot lingered, his mind tracing the final threads of the mystery, the broken compass, the aconite, the whispers of mutiny, and Clara Langston's poignant truth. The ship was safe, but the human heart, Poirot knew, would always harbor its own uncharted waters. In the captain's quarters, a stark room of nautical charts and polished brass, Poirot met with Captain Reginald Thorne to conclude the matter. Thorne stood behind his desk, his broad shoulders squared, his weathered face etched with a mix of relief and weariness. The logbook, once marked with Hargrove's circled name, lay closed, its secrets no longer a threat. Monsieur Poirot, Thorne said, his voice gruff but sincere, you've saved my ship, my command. Blake's mutiny could have torn us apart. I owe you more than I can say. Poirot inclined his head, his expression modest but firm. Non, Captain, I seek only the truth, and the truth has restored order. Monsieur Blake, driven by ambition, poisoned Hargrove's tea with aconite from the galley, then shattered the compass to signal his intent, a mutiny to seize control. The shard on his boot, the sketch marked midnight, the whispers among the crew, all pointed to his hand. Thorne's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with suppressed anger. Hargrove was loyal to a fault. Blake's a fool to think he could have led this ship. Poirot nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. Fools, Captain, are often the most dangerous, for they see only their own horizon. Blake confessed under the weight of evidence, and your crew, now aware, will stand firm. He paused, his gaze softening. And Mademoiselle Langston, her quest was one of peace, not vengeance. Her truth completes the chart, leaving no shadows. Thorne's expression softened, a rare moment of vulnerability. "I misjudged her," he admitted. "And Hargrove, I should have trusted him more. That error in the Azores, it was a mistake, not disloyalty." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice gentle but pointed. "Trust, Captain, is the compass of leadership. You have regained it, and the meridian sails true." Thorne extended a hand, which Poirot shook with a firm grip. "Your little gray cells, Poirot, they're worth more than a dozen navigators. If ever you need a favor, this ship is yours." Poirot smiled, a rare warmth beneath his mustache. "Merci, Captain, but my reward is the order restored, the truth revealed." As Poirot left the quarters, he ascended to the deck, where the air was crisp with the scent of salt and renewal. The passengers, emerging from their cabins, moved with lighter steps, the shadow of murder lifted. Clara Langston stood near the railing, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, a small wreath of white flowers in her hands. Poirot approached, his steps soft. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you honor your father's memory." She turned, her hazel eyes clear, a quiet strength in her smile. "Thanks to you, Monsieur Poirot. I'll lay this wreath when we pass the island. It's enough." Poirot nodded, his gaze turning to the sea. The meridian's course was set, its compass, though not the crimson one, pointing true. "The sea," he murmured, "is vast, but the mind of Hercule Poirot navigates its depths. The truth, like a star, always shines." He stood a moment longer, the wind tugging at his coat, then turned back to the ship's heart, ready for whatever mysteries the horizon might hold.